I was sliding Kayla's stack of gardening books back onto the shelf. The side table was cluttered with catalogs and mail and an unopened credit card offer, and I was making room for the groceries I had just had delivered. I picked up her favorite book, one she read every spring, and a small card fell out from somewhere in the middle. I turned it over. The envelope was addressed to her in Jenna's handwriting. Inside was a thank you card, the kind you find at a local art market, rough-edged, painted with bright, uneven poppies. The note started out sweet: "Dear Kayla, thank you for the perfect lakeside sunrise. I do not think I will ever have instant coffee without smiling now. Can we keep that a tradition?" Beneath her words was a little drawing of a sun rising from wavy lines, a smiley face with spiky hair drawn in marker. I stopped mid-step, reading it again. I had never been up for any sunrise trip, not even the few times Kayla dragged me out to Lake Harriet for an early walk. Can we keep that a tradition? Inside jokes about instant coffee. I did not even think Kayla liked instant coffee, and Jenna was not exactly a morning person, not from the stories Kayla told. My chest felt heavier than it should over a simple card. I slid it back into its envelope, shut it in my palm, and listened for footsteps in the hallway. Nothing. Groceries beeped in the hall. I stood there staring at the card, replaying the words "perfect sunrise," "tradition," "inside joke," wondering what I had missed and when. I remained standing beside the shelf, the card's weight suddenly disproportionate, some tectonic shift beginning low in my gut. Had I truly missed some group outing? I tried to piece together a rational explanation. Maybe there had been an early morning hospital event, or perhaps I had forgotten about a volunteer shift that Kayla had regaled me with after the fact. I imagined Jenna in a big group, yawning over a sunrise cup. That would explain the inside joke, maybe. I ran through possible platonic answers. Perhaps Jenna simply liked sending elaborate thank you notes, maybe drawing odd little cartoons to all her friends. Kayla was always gathering up stray, creative types. Their circle thrived on shared rituals and sentimental cards. Still, something about the phrasing clung to me like a burr. Can we keep that a tradition? The memory of Jenna and Kayla exchanging long, secretive looks at last year's hospital picnic pressed in on my mind, those moments I had felt like an extra wheel, tolerated and briefly acknowledged before their conversation tumbled into private laughter. Even then I had told myself I was being silly. Kayla's world at the hospital always felt inscrutable, something closed off to me, built of shiftwork and acronyms and a closeness born of too many overnight emergencies. But I never sensed humor about instant coffee between them, or playfulness with sunrises. Now the unsteadiness in my chest translated to a sickish heat rushing up my neck. My mouth tasted dry. The card was just a piece of paper, but my palm was sweating. I wondered if anyone walking by the door could see something written on my face. At that point, I still wanted to believe there was an ordinary explanation. Before I get into what happened next, if you enjoy stories like this, take a second to like the video and subscribe to Reddit Ride. It really does help the channel. By the time Kayla came home, arms full of produce, cheeks flushed from the cold, I had already put the card back where I found it. I waited until we had settled the groceries and she was wiping down a tomato, humming to herself. "Hey," I said as she rooted for a bag of carrots, "I found a card from Jenna in your gardening book." "Did I forget about some weekend at the lake?" She paused just for a second, then smiled and kept moving. "That was from the hospital volunteer retreat last spring. You probably blocked it out, one of those work things I dragged you through in stories." Jenna gets all sentimental. It was just a group weekend. She checked the oven dial like she had not just introduced an entirely new memory of our lives. "What about dinner tonight, Chinese or Thai?" I almost let myself believe her. I did not remember any retreat like that, and the way the card was written did not sound like something a whole group attended. But Kayla was already pulling out her phone to look up menus. The conversation skidded off my curiosity and went somewhere safer. The familiar rhythms of our evening resumed, or something close to it. Kayla started pulling takeout menus from the divider next to the fridge, both of us trading suggestions that barely stuck. As she read out a list of curries, I set the table with our battered blue plates, stacking napkins with a slow deliberation, every motion deliberate. The apartment seemed full of small, domestic noises. The tight snap of the fridge closing, Kayla running water over rice to see if it was salvageable, her footsteps soft on the tile. She moved with practiced efficiency, pausing once to smooth her shirt, her face almost too composed. We drifted through small talk, commiserating over work emails, bemoaning my latest failed bridge estimate, Kayla recounting a patient's endearing dog stories. Now and then my mind drifted back to that card, the cartoon sun with its wild lines, but I forced myself to smile as she recited a story about the nurse manager's obsession with colored binder clips. TV flickered in the background, reruns of a show we both half-loved, more wallpaper than entertainment. Kayla laughed at a joke, but her laugh felt a little too bright, like she was trying to signal something. I studied the way she cradled her phone in one hand, the device perpetually within reach, her gaze darting between me and the dark screen as though waiting for someone else to speak up. Routine had not fallen apart, I told myself. But the thing lying beneath the calm mundanity of dinner was not contentment, but a patina over something distant, something that used to feel more present. I recalled fleetingly how she would pull me close by the waist even as she layered takeout boxes in the fridge, giggling low, bumping hips, making offhand plans about gardening or trips. But tonight she returned to a careful, efficient solitude, every movement precise, voices kept light. Later, as we ate takeout on the couch, I watched Kayla scrolling quickly through her phone, texting during dinner. She laughed at something I said, but her gaze never shifted from the screen. Days went by. I told myself it was nothing, a card, a joke, maybe a strange moment from one of her hospital weekends. But I decided quietly to watch more closely. The intervening days stretched out in a parade of ordinary interruptions. I tried to distract myself, tried to banish the card from my mind by doubling my laps at the gym after work, pushing through sets with a half-hearted focus. I let the locker room noise fill my brain, drowned myself in sports radio blasting from the treadmill. At home, when Kayla worked late, I found myself sinking into old habits, staring blankly at my phone, scrolling through news articles and Instagram stories, letting hours pass where nothing new entered my head. It felt easier to focus on work deadlines, happy hours with coworkers, even when the laughter ran too thin, the drinks leaving a louder emptiness behind. I watched my own mind arguing with itself, the rational side telling me I was being ridiculous, that everyone's partner has friends and hobbies and routine surprises. That suspicion was ugly and pointless. Do not be that jealous partner, I reminded myself after every stray, anxious thought. But as I lay in bed at night, the other voice crept in with a whisper. You are not wrong, something is off, and you will regret not paying attention. Each time Kayla slid into bed with her back to me, murmuring a sleepy good night, the debate would flare, then fizzle unresolved. That next week, one night after dinner, we split a bottle of red wine, and Kayla started folding laundry on the living room rug while I queued up a new show. She chatted about an upcoming volunteer night at the hospital, how short-staffed they were, how Jenna was rallying everyone for some new arts and healing project. I poured the last glass. That was when I noticed the bracelet on her wrist. It was delicate silver, almost too dainty for her usual style. Kayla has always preferred chunky, practical things, her nurse's bracelets as she called them, easy to wipe down, nothing too precious. This looked more like something Jenna would wear, come to think of it. I squinted at it and tried to keep things light. That is new, right? I have not seen you wear that before. Kayla glanced down and kept folding a t-shirt. Oh yeah, vendor fair at the hospital. I just grabbed it on a whim. Retail therapy, right? She did not make eye contact, fingers moving faster over the laundry pile. Looks nice, I said, but she had already pivoted. So did you end up watching the next episode after I fell asleep? She shrugged off the bracelet with her words, shifting to Netflix, her voice rising a notch with fake cheer. I let it go, but kept watching her as she leaned over the laundry, shoulders subtly tight. The TV flickered, Kayla's phone buzzed. She excused herself, saying she needed to check in with Simone about volunteer rosters. After she vanished into the bedroom, still on the phone, I picked up my own phone and absently scrolled through our shared Google Calendar, convinced that somewhere among the colored blocks and invitations I would find the peg these stories hung from. I tried to match Kayla's recollection of recent hospital events to the dates she said she was gone, flipping forward and back between work events and weekends. A couple of the volunteer nights she mentioned had little pins on our calendar, marked in her careful handwriting. Marked subject to change, but the ones she referenced most vehemently seemed always to fall on nights where she would announce, last minute, a schedule change or an extra shift cover. I squinted at the digital squares, willing something out of the mess, a pattern, a mistake. Something concrete. Oddly, there seemed to be a swelling tide of evenings declared unavailable or out late, these past 2 months in particular, usually coinciding with Jenna's public mentions of some initiative on her own social media. There was no smoking gun, but the pattern left an aftertaste, like something I used to overlook but was now painfully aware of. Hours unaccounted for, sudden absences, corrections made on the fly. The bracelet sparkled faintly from the bedroom doorway in the low lamplight. I closed my phone, heart pounding quietly, and told myself again that people buy new things, that sometimes hours slip through the cracks. I told myself she deserved privacy, that everyone buys something whimsical now and then. But even after easy laughter returned, I kept replaying the defensiveness in her voice. When she came back into the room, she asked about what we should do for lunch tomorrow, and I nodded, as if the bracelet had never registered. The next morning, I was at the office, clicking through the never-ending rows of bridge inspections and concrete estimates, when Kayla called. She sounded bright, ordinary. She asked about pad thai or pizza for dinner, what time I would be home. But before I could answer about my actual schedule, she cut me off with, "Sorry, have to run, someone else at the nurse's station. Text you if I leave late." It was not unusual for her to be busy, but usually she would drag out these calls, making up silly voices from my coworkers in the background, telling me about her patients. Now it was all business, clipped and sudden. I realized that even our relationship check-ins, a new thing Kayla championed for a couple months, had felt driven by her, timed and managed. I was almost glad when the call ended. At least the ordinary routines suggested nothing was really wrong. That illusion only lasted a few evenings. It was late Thursday, dark outside, and I was trying once again to fix the stupid hinge on the spare room door. Kayla walked past me, phone to her ear, and slipped out onto the balcony. I could hear the low hum of her voice, punctuated by bursts of silence. Every couple of minutes she peeked through the glass door back into the living room, like she was checking to see if I might come outside. When she finally came back in, I asked, "Everything okay with Simone?" "You seem a little tense." She tucked the phone away, pulled her cardigan tighter. "Yeah, Simone just needs a sounding board. Stuff with her job. Drama." She moved briskly toward the kitchen, her tone closing off any further questions. "You hungry? Let's order in." There was no space for more conversation, so I let it drop, but the habit of new phone privacy stretched between us like a thin line. Kayla had always taken calls in the kitchen, on speaker sometimes, laughing at inside jokes I did not understand. Now I saw her texting on the balcony, her reflection double-imaged in the glass, eyes searching the apartment as if our walls had ears. After dinner, I sat beside her on the couch, watching her tap out responses to someone, the blue light pooling beneath her chin. I pressed my palm to her knee, but she only squeezed my hand and turned her gaze back to the phone. I tried more than once that night to coax something familiar out from between us. I reached for a joke about her Rice Crisp laundry method, twisting the old punchline in a way that used to make her snort with laughter. Kayla smiled, polite but absent, the smile not reaching her eyes. The surface of her attention was elsewhere, her thumb floating over the phone's keyboard while I offered up memories of the last disastrous attempt at baking together. She responded at one point, "We should try that again sometime," her tone a little too flat, like she was recycling phrases from an old script. The ache of distance snagged at me. For a long time we had been comfortable in easy silence together. Now the silence swung heavily, growing brittle at the edges. I thought about putting on the playlist we saved for winter nights, making some obvious point to draw her in, but the hope felt stubborn and childish. There is a danger in being near someone whose mind is legs away. That intimacy can morph into a kind of loneliness, so acute you feel foolish for naming it. I brought up a story from our first year living together, hoping memory would loosen what the present had lost, but Kayla only nodded again, her eyes glued to the device, absent, distracted, unreachable. I put my hand back in my own lap and let her thumb out another message. That weekend we met Simone and her partner Marcus for brunch at Victor's, and the whole place smelled of burnt coffee and cinnamon rolls. The four of us swapped the usual neighborhood complaints. Plows had shredded the sidewalk, the mayor was toast, the hospital's new parking regs were ridiculous. Toward the end, as the conversation wandered, I turned to Simone. "So you survived the last volunteer night." I said it with a smile, hoping to nurse my own curiosity without sounding too pointed. Simone's fork froze halfway to her lips. "Oh yeah, busy. Lots of things going on." Her eyes flashed to Kayla. For a second, no one said a word. Later, as we all stood to leave, Marcus mentioned offhandedly, "I thought you were out with Jenna that night, Kayla, or at least that is what Simone said." He reached for the check, seemingly unaware of any strangeness. Kayla let out a small laugh that sounded nothing like her. "It was just a crazy overlapping night. Anyway, Liam, can you water my big pothos this week if I get home late?" "I think I am killing the thing." Simone and I exchanged a glance, sharp and heavy, but the moment passed without comment. I tucked their oddness into a drawer in my head, added it to the pile. We said our goodbyes, but as Kayla gripped my elbow through the glass door, she had already shifted back to banal topics: new Thai place, summer plans, my out-of-control email inbox. A couple nights later, we went to the local community center's monthly mixer, something we used to enjoy together. Too much free wine, awkward small talk, the comfort of routine. Kayla texted that she would be late, work's a nightmare, and arrived half an hour after things kicked off, still half in her scrubs. She blamed a sick child for her schedule. then spent almost all of the evening at a side table, messaging on her phone. Our friends asked where she had been, and I covered for her with a shrug. Kayla has a lot on her plate. But as the night dragged on, I realized she was hardly with me at all, physically there, but orbiting some private conversation. It was the first time I had looked around the room and felt completely alone, surrounded by voices but untouched. The whole point of these mixers had once been a sense of connection. Now it just felt like a performance I could no longer believe in. After we left the mixer, I found myself walking slowly through the dense evening air, Kayla ahead of me on the sidewalk. The city felt strung out from winter, piles of gray snow hardening at the curb, streetlights struggling through a mist of drizzle. Each step thudded with memory, Kayla's laugh ringing down an avenue after too much box-dressé, her hand finding mine as we slipped on icy corners, the two of us pressed close on the back steps outside the center, phones silent as we watched the city blink against the cold. Tonight, everything felt separated by glass. The rumble of distant traffic was a private soundtrack in my head. Kayla's silhouette, framed ahead under a neon-lit awning, seemed impossibly far, no matter how much I tried to pace with her. A car honked, she looked back, but only to check for traffic. There was no weight in her gaze. Back home, I watched her tug off her scrubs and let her hair down, the motions methodical, and tried to remember the last time the city at night did not feel like evidence of loneliness. Where I once found comfort in the noise, the bus hissing past our window, the elevator's low groan, it now felt like confirmation that whatever bound us had quietly unspooled. When we got home, Kayla asked about the laundry rotation, unlocked her phone, and left the room. I wanted to ask something meaningful, but all I could manage was, "The meeting next Thursday is earlier, right?" She nodded, not looking up from her phone. On Saturday, I went to the farmer's market down by Lindell. I wanted to get smoked fish and some early green onions for breakfast. Halfway through the bakery line, I spotted Jenna, her bright scarf, unruly hair pinned back, a heavy tote slung on her shoulder. She saw me before I saw her. She did not smile right away. Instead, a startled look crossed her face, and she fumbled with her phone. "Liam, hey, I did not know you came here this early," Jenna said, forcing a bright tone. I tried to match her energy. "Kayla is on me about fresh bread. Got to keep the boss happy." I meant it as a dumb joke, but she just nodded tense. There were a couple beats of silence. Then Jenna glanced at her phone, fingers nervous. "Kayla has a big decision ahead." "That is what she told you, right?" I frowned. "Decision," she dropped her eyes. "Oh, never mind. She has probably got it all worked out. Hey, they're calling my number. See you around, Liam." With that, she ducked out of the line, nearly bumping into a stroller on her way. She did not look back. The march back to our apartment felt longer than usual, the bag of bread under my arm growing heavier with every block. Jenna's words, "big decision," seemed to echo with every step. A decision about what? I tried to catalog all the innocent things Kayla might be deciding about. Maybe a new shift pattern, a committee at the hospital, some grant or project she had not wanted to bore me with yet. My mind clung to those explanations, trying to stitch a story together where I was not shut out. Still, it was hard not to recall the way Jenna had darted her eyes away, fidgeted with her phone, her cheer coming off as brittle and forced. I remembered times when she and Kayla joked about middle-of-the-night emails or surprise parties for mutual friends. I even felt a rush of misplaced gratitude. Jenna had once given us a beautiful handmade quilt for our last apartment, had crashed on our couch after a bad breakup. All of that made things less likely to be sinister, did it not? But then the image of the card, the matching inside joke, pressed up against the impression of Jenna's quick getaway at the market, the pieces not locking together no matter how I forced them. The suspicion, and now a prickle of dread, settled in. I walked home remembering the minute detail of her voice, something rehearsed about what Kayla had or had not told me. I said nothing to Kayla that afternoon, just watched her when she came back from errands. She was unusually quiet, made us sandwiches for lunch, and asked to put on music. I agreed. Normal life settled over us like a thin veil, as if we could paper over the strangeness with routine. I watched Kayla spread mayonnaise with slow focus, her hand trembling just a little, the knife scraping sound harsh in the hush. She passed me the plate and turned to tidy the counter. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, catching dust motes, turning everything gold and uncertain. We talked about nothing, heads half turned away from each other. The price of eggs at the market, whether the tap water was tasting strange again, faint complaints about spring allergies. Every now and then I threw a glance her way, searching for some route back to whatever comfort we used to have. When I asked if she wanted to take a walk after lunch, she demurred. Too many errands, too tired, maybe later. I volunteered to do the dishes, hoping the familiar click of plates, the hum of water, might make us feel normal again. Kayla lingered briefly at my side, brushing fingertips past my shoulder, but her touch felt ghostly. The kitchen smelled of dill and bread. In that crowded silence, I wished I could ask for reassurance outright. But the words stuck. Instead, I watched her retreat to the living room, music rising and falling from the tiny speaker, as if we were playing house in someone else's life. Our apartment, once so suffused with easy energy, Kayla belting out songs, me clapping along, now ticked with nervous quiet, the colors on the walls seeming duller. If she noticed, she said nothing. I pressed harder on a stubborn pan, soap clinging to my hands, refusing to let my mind freewheel into accusation. That Sunday started perfectly normal. Kayla whipped up pancakes, singing "Hair a Mess." I was under the sink, fixing a cabinet door that always squeaked when you opened it for dishwasher tablets. The banter was fine, jokes about maple syrup, my disastrous attempt at sourdough. She mentioned another relationship check-in for next week, her tone odd and formal, like she was running a performance review. I half listened, mentally crossing off how to get through the rest of the day. I told her sure, whatever worked. But already my mind had wandered somewhere else, to the card from Jenna, to Simone's avoided answers, to Jenna at the market shifting her weight from foot to foot and referencing some unspoken decision. When Kayla headed out to run errands, I put away the pancake batter and detoured into her crafting corner to straighten up. Really, I was just looking for tape, but the drawer stuck and a bundle of something slid to the floor. I caught it before it spilled and realized at a glance that I was holding a small stack of Polaroids, rubber banded together. The photos were unmistakable. Kayla and Jenna, arms around each other in front of a rustic wood cabin, lake in the background, sunlight behind them, too early in the day for anyone but real morning people. In some shots, Jenna's head rested on Kayla's shoulder. In others, they toasted with ugly mugs painted with lopsided hearts, wide, goofy grins across their faces. Kayla's hair was mussed, skin pink from sun or blushing or maybe just too much laughter. I flipped through another photo, a snapshot of instant coffee packets lined up on a railing, the same mugs in the frame, Jenna's handwriting visible on one sleeve. My hands shook. I sat on the edge of the bed, photos fanned out on my lap, and counted backwards. When had Kayla claimed to have these mandatory volunteer nights? Who else had known? I tucked the stack back exactly where I found it, pressing the photos to the very bottom of the drawer, and closed it. After I pressed the drawer shut, I sat there in the dim corner of the room, head in my hands, the air tense and thin. Grief and anger crashed through me in waves, my mind a reel of Kayla's affection over the years. Her hand steady on the small of my back at the ER after my bad fall, the way she would cup my face in both palms as if nothing else existed, our inside jokes whispered under the covers in the dead of winter. Those seemed to belong to a life with rules, with certainty, where trust was the bedrock of everything that came after. Now my faith in all of it twisted with every memory. I did not know how long I sat there, clutching the image of Kayla's happiness in an unfamiliar landscape. Should I confront her? Should I keep silent and try to believe in something benign, or at least return to the quiet denial that had become my comfort? The answer flickered just out of reach. I felt myself circling the question until it was threadbare. When she came home, I forced my face into an easy smile. I did not want to face the consequences, not yet. I rehearsed my lines in the bathroom mirror. I was not ready to lose my footing altogether. But that night I barely slept, replaying images behind my eyelids, flinching at every shift in the dark, Kayla's steady breathing a taunt I could neither embrace nor leave. That night I said nothing. Kayla made chicken stir-fry, touched my arm more than usual, asked about my day in that light, musical way she once reserved for especially good moods. I wondered if she sensed the difference in me, if she could read the shallow breath in my throat, see the photos flickering behind my eyes. That week my searching went digital. I started combing through public posts, trying to cross-reference dates and explanations. I had never bothered with Jenna's Instagram before, but suddenly I found myself lying in bed with the covers thrown off, scrolling endlessly. Late one night on Jenna's feed I found what I was looking for, a photo of that same cabin, the two of them seated at a picnic table, sun catching Kayla's face. They both looked pale and happy and undone in a way I could not deny. The date on the post conflicted with the hospital training weekend that Kayla insisted she could not possibly miss, an explanation that had come with a whole script about new charting protocols. There was Kayla tagged by Jenna, holding up that ridiculous mug. And there was the landscape I had never set foot in. Discovery, when it hit in the form of a timestamp and a tag, was like falling through thin ice. I felt myself go hot and clammy, pulse racing somewhere behind my eyes. I scrolled compulsively back and forth through Jenna's posts. Matching up dates to memories, Kayla's stories about exhausting work weekends, scattered check-ins. Phone calls cut short by pager emergencies. I compared the backdrop in each picture to Kayla's description of the worst undercooked cafeteria eggs in history, realizing with a sick jolt that her whole script had been delivered while living out another reality. I wiped sweat from my palms onto the blanket, feeling the pathetic, intrusive guilt of snooping, this childish sense that maybe, if I never found the lie, there would be nothing to grieve. I cycled through outrage and self-disgust in equal measure, branding myself petty and desperate even as the evidence mounted. Every old excuse Kayla had offered now rang hollow, their words echoing in my mind, sharp and laughable. Still, my finger hovered over the screen, rereading for the 10th time the comments between Kayla and Jenna. I could not convince myself that any part of this felt survivable. I did not bring it up. I stared at the phone longer, breathing in shallow bursts, scrolling backwards and forwards to confirm that the timeline really did not work. That night when Kayla came in to brush her teeth, I pretended to be asleep. Around 2 in the morning I sat in the spare room, the only light the ugly old desk lamp. I woke our ancient desktop and clicked into her old Gmail account, one we both had used years back for house paperwork. I should not have checked, I told myself, but my hands had a mind of their own. Buried in the archives was an ongoing chain between Kayla and Jenna. Subject lines like next chapter and budget proposals. They talked about moving in together, strategizing how to secure more grant money for Jenna's nonprofit, hard numbers about the new apartment lease, some lines so nakedly intimate. I count hours until Sunday mornings, and is it silly I cannot drink instant coffee without you anymore? What caught me most, though, was Kayla outlining ways to transfer funds from our shared savings directly as a charitable donation. No, it was not criminal, but it was a deal-breaker in a way nothing else had been. Kayla and Jenna mapped out their future, line by line, dollar by dollar, with barely a mention of me except as a vague financial consideration. I sat in that blue glow, mouse still in my right hand, reading and rereading the email chain past 3 in the morning. Sleep was impossible after that. The next morning found me stumbling through my routine, half-dressed and shivering, the kitchen's linoleum chill seeping through my socks. I poured cereal into my mug, no bowl clean enough for the job, apparently, and watched the flakes go soggy, forgotten after a single bite. Riding the train into work, I watched gray light smear across the glass. The city outside the window had the hard, bright clarity of falsehood. In the office, I faked my way through pleasantries, dropping words and files. People called my name, and it took a second too long to respond each time. I found myself wandering to the break room between tasks, running my hands over the countertop's fake granite, focusing on the comfort of doing something simple and concrete. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the calendar's deadlines irrelevant compared to the echo of Kayla's voice in my head, trailed by Jenna's, lines from the emails flashing in bursts, moves, leases, money, mornings. I wondered if anyone could sense the unraveling, if my coworkers could hear the static under my words. Each ordinary face seemed pincushioned by my own anxiety. Stepping outside during lunch, the wind was sharp, and I let the bite of it chase some feeling back into my hands. Minneapolis always felt a little cleaner after a bad snowstorm, the gutters swollen with melt and salt. I stared up at the blank windows of our building, wondering when I had last thought of it as home. By then, I was not looking for excuses anymore. I was looking for proof. If you are enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe to Reddit Ride. It helps more than you know. On Monday, I left my office at noon, slipped on my coat, and walked to our downtown bank branch. I barely remember the small talk with the manager. I just know I asked as plainly as I could to see recent withdrawals on our joint account. One stood out 5 figures, recently paid to Third Wave Arts Project, Jenna's nonprofit. Authorized by Kayla, listed as a donation. I did not make a scene. I asked for the paperwork, signed the receipt, slid everything into a folder. I rode the elevator down to the street, hands cold, and thought only about what I was going to do next. At home that night, I assembled the proof. The card, the bracelet, the photos, the bank documentation, the emails, printed and stacked. There was nothing left for imagination or forgiveness. When Kayla came home from work that Tuesday evening, I suggested we eat at the table rather than in front of the TV. She barely batted an eye, just nodded and unloaded her bag. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The scraping of her fork, an old clock ticking. When she finished, I got up, retrieved the small stack from the sideboard, and laid it in front of her. She looked from the card to the photos, to the printout from our bank, and back to me. I spoke first, my voice calm but tired. I want you to tell me what is actually going on with you and Jenna. No stories, no group retreats. I have the card. I have the photos. I know about the cabin and I know about the money. Kayla kept her hands in her lap. At first she shook her head. It is not what you think, not exactly. I do not want any more misdirection, I said. Just the truth. She was silent for a long minute. Then her face changed, the fight dropped out, and something else took its place. She folded her arms on the table, looked up at the pendant light, and said quietly, I have been seeing Jenna. Not seeing like we have been together. For months, weekends, overnights. We used your savings for her nonprofit because she needed help getting it off the ground, and I needed something different. I am planning to move in with her. We have been waiting for the right time to tell you. My breath stayed steady. I waited. She was crying now, not sobbing, just silent tears. I am sorry, Liam. Not just for the lies, but for not being honest sooner. I cannot hide who I am. I do not want to. I am relieved, if anything, to not hide anymore. I hope someday you will forgive me. You did not deserve this. I grasped for anger, but mostly there was just a dull ache in my chest, like I had been gut-punched and forced to keep standing. I finally said, I will stay at my brother's for a while. I will talk to a lawyer about the finances. Please do not try to reach out except for the apartment or legal stuff. She nodded. There were no more words left. I packed quietly, grabbing only what I needed: socks, shirts, my laptop, a battered book, and old parka. My hands only shook once as I zipped the suitcase. I set the spare key on the kitchen counter, glanced around a room that had belonged to both of us, and stepped out into the hall. I locked the condo door behind me, the tumblers faint and final, and stood alone in the empty quiet, hands still resting on the key. I did not look back. I made my way to my brother's place, a spare set of keys heavy in my pocket, the chilled air stinging at my cheeks as I crossed the city. His apartment felt foreign, an arrangement of bland sofas and neatly stacked mail, blankets with none of Kayla's scent. He met me at the door and said little, only pointed wordlessly to the guest room and pressed a mug of tea into my hand. That first night I laid on top of the covers, the heat barely reaching my feet, suitcase open on the floor half unpacked. The window rattled in its frame, muffled city noise drifted up, indistinct. I let my mind go slack, letting Kayla's voice echo and fade. Her honesty at the kitchen table mingled with the remembered laughter from lifetimes ago. For hours I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, trying to remember how it felt to believe what she said. Relief irised out faintly in my chest, relief that I no longer had to question, that the bottom had finally fallen away, that the next step was my own. The pain, sharper now, twisted in odd shapes. I mourned not just her, but the years built on a trust undone by her hand. Early in the morning I walked circles around the block, noticing the way city lights glimmered on slush and the world's hush at the end of betrayal. By sunrise I crawled back into the sagging guest bed, listening to the rush of pipes behind the wall, and tried to picture a future not defined by missing her, by doubting everyone. The silence was thick, but filled too with the possibility of cold, of pain, and also in time of something else. I closed my eyes, the ache of loss enveloping me, and let it carry me towards sleep, however unsteady and strange.